section B of the case studies in the ethics paper. Case studies are the practical side of the personality of the candidate, and in fact, it is the highly scoring to get more marks. Ethics, we can score more in case studies. While taking care of the case studies, better always to start with the case studies in the paper. Because in the morning you will be fresh and you can write them accurately and can score more marks. But while taking the case study, you must always remember that there are two parts in the case study. One is the issue which is presented, and the second is the solution to be given to the case study. And we must understand why the case study is prescribed for the students. A case study is a scenario which presents a realistic and complex situation involving a problem, a conflict, or a dilemma to be solved or resolved. So a case study puts a candidate in the role of a decision maker or an administrator facing a real life situation. What is the purpose of the case study? To test a candidate's attitude to issues relating to integrity, probity in public administration, as problem-solving approach to various issues and conflicts faced by him in dealing with the society. To test a candidate's first the attitude and aptitude, decision-making ability, problem to solve, ethical dilemma to resolve, power of judgment. It's very important. It's to power of the judgment on the spot. It is to know the gap between the theory which the candidate learns and the practice he puts into. His mental alertness of the candidate. And finally, suitability to civil services. Today, the candidate should solve the problems or the challenges the society has been facing today. So, what is expected from a candidate by a case study? To make it very simple, a case study demands a positive attitude from a candidate, a problem-solving approach to various issues and conflicts faced by him and dealing with society, and finally, ethical approach in decision making. So this is what is being expected from the case study. Now, when a paper is given to you, when you come across the case study, it's always better to understand what is the nature of a case study. So the nature of the case study is very important because while solving a problem, you must understand whether it relates to the ethics, whether it relates to the values, whether it is the procedure or a situation, or simply how to give an opinion. So, it's always advantageous for you to understand the nature of the case study. It is understood by the study of the past papers that the UPSC has asked the nature of the case studies can be classified into 5 categories. Number 1 is about the ethics-based case study. In the ethics-based case study, you have to study the ethical aspect of the issue given to you. The second is the value-based case study. Here you have to decide the values of an individual or values of the administration. So this you have to focus on the solution or the clarification of the values. The third one is about the opinion-based case study. Here you are going to give, just like a consultant gives an opinion on a situation. The fourth one is about the situation-based case study. In a given situation, how we are going to take action is being studied in the situation-based case study. The fifth one is the procedure-based case study. Most of the issues or the problems are to be solved in a systematic and the procedure prescribed by various acts and various regulations, rules which are prescribed for a bureaucrat. So the five aspects are very important to study, and we are going to see the 6 case studies of 2018 as to what is the nature of each case study. Then the second aspect, while tackling a case study, you must understand the type of the case study. UPSC has given 5 types of case studies. Here, in the previous case studies, 4 to 5 choices are given, asking you to comment on each choice and select one basing on its merits and prioritize them. So normally such case studies are very few. Once or twice they were given, and it's a rare, of course, but it is one type of the case study. The second is 4 to 5 choices are given here, asking you to comment on each choice. Also ask you to furnish an alternative choice without restricting to the choices already given. So you can come up with your own solution rather than restricting yourself to the choices given by the UPSC in the paper. The third is about the two options are given in the case study itself, and you are asked to come up with a third alternative, and you have to give the merits and demerits as to your third alternative is better than the first and second given by the UPSC. And the fourth step of the case study, they don't give any choices. In the first one, second one, third one, choices are given to the candidates. But in the fourth one, no choices are given to them. The candidate himself has to identify the choices, and he must give the merits and demerits of each and every one, and finally decide which one is the best one to give the solution. And the fifth one is more natural, more common, mostly asked to give reasons with the justifications. So they ask you what is the reason, how we are going to solve it, and we have to give the justification. So this is the fifth type of the case study. Normally, all the 5 types are being asked in the UPSC. And so these are the 5 aspects. Now, the third aspect, while answering the case study, the candidate should understand what are the ethical issues involved in a case study. The ethical issues, whether it is relating to the honesty, integrity, responsibility, or public interest, or responsiveness, or maybe the minimum cost to the public exchequer, or it may be allegiance to constitution. So the issues are to be understood as to why this case study is given and what issues are to be solved. The fourth one they must understand is the rules. While writing a case study, they must understand the rules as to how it is to be written. First, they must understand the nature of the case study, whether it is value, or whether it is the ethics involved, or is a situation, opinion, or a procedure like that. The second one is the type of the case study, whether the choices are given, if so, how many choices, what choice is the best one, or we have to generate the choices or give reasons to the justification. This is to be understood. The third one is identify the ethical issues involved in the case study, exactly what is required to solve or resolve in this case study. The fourth one, of course, is the distinguish positive and negative elements which are given in the case study. The fifth one is the take always ethical stand, no compromise. Even for small things also, you should always be on the ethical side, for never go for any unethical practices or compromising the ethical issues. The sixth one is about approach should be practical. You should not go for idealistic or maybe far-fetching. It should always be practical and it's doable, and people should understand, yes, this can be applied and we can get the result. The seventh one is the solution must be in public interest, not the private interest. So public interest is a very important component which the UPSC asked in the 2018 paper which we discussed in the first section A. The eighth one is never change the circumstances, because the case study which is given to the candidates, that's the facts. We should not change these facts to suit our solutions. We must give a solution to suit the facts, not the facts to suit the solution. And the ninth one is always be objective and free from personal bias. You may not like the situation, but you should not go by your biases, your prejudices, but you must always go by the facts given in the case study. The answer with the justification, whatever answer you are giving, it should be justified with the facts and figures or by the cases already decided in favor of that particular issue. Then furnish reasoning leading to a conclusion, not the reason alone. That means while you come to a particular conclusion, it should be supported by enough evidence and enough reasons that will be more convincing. And finally, it's very, very important to understand that any case study should be just like a good short story. A small child should also understand, just like the people can understand the short stories, it should be written in such a way that means we must have a structured approach for each and every case study. For example, this is we can call it as the template. A template should be there to write the case study so that the logical reasoning leading to the conclusion should be understood by the examiner. So anything you write as a case study, it should be structured. So from this point of view, we are going to discuss. Before that, I would like to give a structured approach what I have developed over a period of time. When we start the case study, it's always start with the template. The first one is the case study relates to which topic in the syllabus, because there are more than 60 topics which are identified in the syllabus itself, and it's better you understand from which part this case study is coming and you write. This will give a good impression that you are thorough with the subject and with the practicality of the case study. Number two, you identify the elements addressed in the case study, ethical or maybe logical, legal or personal. What are the elements which are given in the case study? The third is you have to validate the choices based on the pros and cons. The case study, UPSC normally gives certain choices. For example, in the case in the 2018 also, in the 11th case study, we got the choices. Now we have to go for the pros and cons of those choices. That's called the validation. If the choices are not given, just like in the case study number 7, so there you have to identify the choices, alternatives. Then you have to go for validating the choices based on the pros and cons. Then come to the selection of the choice based on the outcome and consequences. So this is very important. What solution you are going to give, and the solution be based on the outcome and the consequences relating to it. Then the sixth item is the reasoning to arrive at the conclusion. So you must give the reason as to why you come to such a selection of the choice or the conclusion or decision. And if you find any support with the constitutional provisions, the law, or maybe the reports which were studied by the experts, those things you can quote to support your logical conclusion. And finally, ethical lesson to be learned from the case study. What ethical lesson we can learn from this case study? It is to show our personality. After end of this thing, it's a moral which you are giving to the examiner as to what type of person you are. What is the ethical lesson you have learned of the case study? So this is what is very important to understand while writing the case study. Now, let's go to understand and how to write the case studies for the 2018 paper which is given by the UPSC and which we have written very recently. Now let's start with the question number 7. Now it starts with 7. Let's start with the 7. In this, Rakesh is a responsible district level officer. He's very knowledgeable, honest, and entrusted with the responsibility of identifying the beneficiaries under a health care scheme. Now, there are certain criteria where the people who are eligible for this scheme are given here four uh, types of criteria: 60 years of age and above, belonging to reserved community, family income less than 1 lakh, and the post-treatment prognosis is likely to be high to make a positive difference to the quality of the life. So then what happened one day, an old couple visited the Rakesh office with their application. So they have been the residents of a village in his district since their birth. The old man is diagnosed with a rare condition that causes obstruction in the large intestine. As a consequence, he has severe abdominal pain, and he deserves all the qualification except B. B, that means it's not belonging to the particular community. So you can find here the criteria except B. So that is the criteria. So the question, this is the case we have studied. So any financial help would certainly make a significant difference in their quality of life. Now the question, this is the case what we have seen. The question is, how should Rakesh respond to the situation? That means, in other words, you must understand what are the choices available to Rakesh. While studying the case, we must always understand what are the major issues we have to identify. Now, here is an honest officer, Mr. Rakesh. He is respected by other people, and he was interested in the scheme. That scheme is to give benefit to the certain people suffering from health problems, and there are certain conditions to identify the beneficiaries. And here is a couple who fulfill all the conditions except the category, reserved category. They don't belong to the reserved category. So the question is how Rakesh can take the issue. While writing this case study, always write the case study relates to foundational values, especially empathy and compassion. Here, the man can leave this couple stating that they don't fit into the scheme, but that is not the aim of administration. An administrator should be a compassionate person. He must have the empathy towards the people. So, this is related to the foundational values and especially empathy and compassion. Now, what are the ethical issues involved in the case study? Now, here the ethical issues are whether Rakesh should go by the rules and regulations strictly and or he must go by the spirit of the law and take a proactive role to help this old couple because they have no other people to look after these people. So, the second step while writing the case study is the ethical issues, whether to go by the rules and regulations strictly or to go by the spirit of the rule and become proactive. So, here the nature of the case study, when you study them, it is on the ethics. So the nature of the case study is ethics-based case study, and it is the type 4 where the choices are not given and the candidate has to identify the choices available to him. The first choice is like any other typical bureaucrat, he can say that that is against the rules. So you simply can ignore because it is against the norm B. That's first choice. The second choice available to him is the violation of the guidelines and go ahead on the ethical consideration because his conscience says that you must help these people and you can violate the rule. Then what are the pros and cons? What the advantages and disadvantages? In the case of simply ignoring the case, uh, the officer or Rakesh will be safe because nobody can question him. He can safely say that this is against the norms. But the disadvantage of this is that he is a robo, inhuman, not caring for the people. In the case of the second one, where you violate the guidelines and go by your conscience, what happens here is that you help. So in the first choice, he is safe because nobody will ask him, but it is inhuman. That's the disadvantage. That's the con of the choice. In the case of the second one, you are helping the fellow being. That's the pros. That's the advantage. But the disadvantage is the violation of the rules and you are going against the law. So these are the two issues. Then what is to be done? So you must go by other alternatives which are available to him. So what are the other alternatives available to him? This, he must be proactive and go for third alternative. Yes. So he can go by three aspects I am giving here. Number one is bring such cases to the notice of the government for kind consideration, and government may heed you and relax the conditions. This is one. Normally, government definitely considers certain important issues where such cases are there. Maybe the number may be less, but definitely government may consider. That's number one. In case government is not considering a review, we have seen what is to be observed while writing the case study. Must understand the nature of the case study, the type of the case study, the ethical issues involved in the case study, and go for the rules which are to be observed, then apply to a structured or a template. So let us apply whatever we have discussed to the 6 case studies given by the UPSC. Let's first take on the first one, that is called the question number 7, and here the case study number 1. Now here Rakesh is a responsible district level officer. He is a very honest person and he was interested with a scheme, a medical scheme, where he has to identify the beneficiaries. There are certain conditions. Based on the conditions, he has to select the beneficiaries. Now, in one of the issues, he identified a couple. That man was, so he was getting abdominal pain frequently that prevents him from doing any physical labor. So he deserves the scheme, but he fails in one area, that is called the criteria B. So he doesn't belong to the reserved category, so he cannot get it. So the question here is, how should Rakesh respond to the situation? So as we have discussed, first of all we have to see the case, first one. The second one is the solution we have to give to the case study. So the first thing what we have to start with is, what is the type of the case, what is the nature of the case study? The nature of the case study after studying this is the ethical issue. Ethical issue as to what Rakesh should do. One is the law, the other is called ethics. So which decision he has to take? Then the second one is the type of the case study. What is the type of the case study here? If here Rakesh has to identify the choices available to him, so we can say this is the fourth type of the case study which normally the UPSC is giving. Then we can see how it is to be written in a structured way. So first of all, we must say the case study relates to foundational values especially empathy and compassion. Because ultimately, a government servant should have compassion and empathy towards the people. It's not a robo go by the rule books. So the choices now he has to identify. The first choice is simply ignore because he is not coming under the conditions, is against the rule. The second is you go a step ahead, violate the rule, and take the decision to extend the same benefit to this person. Now, in the two choices, what you have identified, we must see the pros and cons, the advantages and the disadvantages. In the first choice, the advantage is you will be safe. Most of the people, they say that I must be safe, I should not get any type of allegation against me. But this is the disadvantage of this choice is that you are a inhuman person. You are inhuman and you are a robo, not going by the considerations, you go by the rule book. In the second choice, you are showing your empathy and you are showing as a true human being, but it is a violation of the rules against the law. So there are pros and there are cons. But in these circumstances, can we go for any other alternative? That is very important. A bureaucrat should always be proactive and he must go whether any alternatives are available to him. Here there are certain alternatives we can explore. First thing is you bring this issue to the notice of the government for kind consideration. Such cases normally may be taken into consideration and may relax the rule. There is a possibility for you to extend the help to such people. Suppose it is not accepted by the government, then we can go for some other alternative. Appeal to an NGO and the public to help such cases. There is nothing wrong. You are taking a proactive role and seeing that the ethical aspect is being done to the society. So you are helping a person by appealing to an NGO and the public. Suppose if they are not coming forward to help, then it is up to you to help from your pocket. Spend some amount and also tell your colleagues because you are such an honest person, you got such a regard in the society, so people will definitely come forward to help you for such a noble cause. So Rakesh can take any of the above choices and the ethical lesson we must understand from such a case study is very important. The ethical lesson we can learn from this is a bureaucrat should go beyond the call of the duty. So a bureaucrat should have the responsibility to go beyond what is prescribed to him. The second one is find ethical and lawful ways of overcoming the restrictive prohibitions and come up with the innovative solutions for helping people. This is another important aspect we can learn from the case study. The third one is once decided to help, that's the right way, you can always find a way to do it. So the universe will conspire to help you to help others. So this is what we can learn from the first case study. Let's go to the second case study here. You are a senior officer in the ministry. You have access to important policy decisions and upcoming announcements. Now your minister has enticed you, is asking you to go for aligning the road, the project to his 20 acres farm house. He also suggests that he would facilitate the purchase of a big plot, which is nominal and in and around the proposed mega road project. He also tries to convince you by saying that there is no harm and he promises to supplement the savings in case you do not have sufficient funds. He is also asking that it can be purchased land in your wife's name and is also saying that uh, benefits will accrue to you. But the question is the act of realignment. A lot of agricultural land has to be acquired, thereby causing considerable financial burden on the government. Also, the displacement of the farmers. And if it is not enough, it will involve cutting trees of a large number of trees, denuding the area of its green cover. So, this is an issue where you have to decide between your personal benefit and the public benefit. So, the question here is faced with such a situation, what will you do? Critically examine various conflicts of interest and explain what your responsibilities are as a public servant. So, the conflict of interest. This is a very important area. Already question was asked in the theory, and we must understand how the case study is written. Now, when you go by, it is based on values. So, the nature of the case study is value based. Value based in the sense you are going to decide between your personal values and the societal values or the administrative values. So, there is a conflict on the values. Now, this is a type 5 because you are not going to identify the choices, but you are going to identify the various types of conflicts and responsibilities. So, this is the type 5 case, and it is to be written like this. The case study relates to ethical concerns, especially conflict of interest. What is a conflict of interest? A public official personal interest may influence the performance of his or her public duties. Now, ethical issues involved in the case study, what are they? Whether to go by the words of the minister and be benefited or be beneficial to others, or should he adhere to the norms, the values, the foundational values of the administration? So, this is the issue he has to decide between. Now, the question is, what are the various conflicts of interest? So, here we can go by certain areas of conflict of interest. One is called the self-dealing, dealing in a private capacity and getting the personal benefit. It is by acquisition of the land at a cheaper rate. So, by the senior officer in the government, you are getting the benefit of the knowledge and you are using the knowledge and you are getting the benefit of purchasing the land at a cheaper rate. So, this is self-dealing. The second one, the minister is also requesting you that this can be purchased in the name of the wife. So, dealing in closing members, that's also another type of the conflict of interest. So, you can purchase in the name of in a wife's name, and you can get out of that issue. The third is he's saying that he's going to help you financially also. It's nothing but the bribe. So it is like quid pro quo, and because he is arranging money, and you are going to align as per his request. Now the fourth one is the insider information for personal interest. For example, in the stock market, the insider information, and you purchase or sell the shares, or you can give such a piece of information to your kith and kin. So that is also the conflict of interest. The fifth one is the public loss and the private gain. And here, public are going to lose if this is being revealed or if you go by the advice of the minister. The sixth one is improper use of public property. Here, the financial burden will be there on the state if the alignment is changed. So, these are the 6 areas of conflict of interest. Now, let us see the responsibilities of a government servant. Now, what are the responsibilities cast on the public servant? This is very important. It is already asked in the theoretical aspect, and it's very important that he must go by the recommendations which are there in the second ARC. These are the responsibilities of a public servant. He must go by integrity. He should not mortgage his integrity for personal benefit. So that's the number one. So public servants should be guided solely by public interest in their official decision making. This is what the first recommendation. The second one, he must be impartial. So he should take decisions based on merit alone, not on the benefit which he is going to accrue. The third one is called the commitment to public service. Deliver services in a fair and effective, impartial, courteous manner. So commitment to public service is the third one he must go by. The fourth one is accountability. So he is accountable for whatever action he is going to take, and he will be questioned for his action. More importantly, devotion to duty. So absolute and unstinting devotion towards the duties is their another important responsibility. And more importantly, exemplary behavior. So you must show the behavior of a government servant, otherwise you become unbecoming of a public servant. So these are very important aspects, but more importantly, the social concern, the social responsibility which he is having with him. So if he takes and heeds the decision, the advice of the minister, then financial loss will be there to the government, and agriculture will be hampered. The farmers will have to be rehabilitated, and there is ecology and environmental issue also is involved. For all these things, a public servant should go by the responsibilities cast on him, and he should not go by the word of a minister or somebody else, however great they are, if they violate the very canons of the administration or the foundational values. So, what is the ethical lesson we learn out of this case study? The ethical lesson we can learn out of the case study is a public servant should go by his conscience and by the guidelines and the constitution, and never bend his back or head for the sake of a few benefits. Now let's go to the ninth issue. That's the third case study. The third case study talks about a prohibition is prevailing in a particular area, and you are the superintendent of police, and you have been treating this always as a law and order issue, and you are taking action against the people indulging in illicit liquor. Your inspections show that the parts of the district where the distillation flourishes are economically, industrially, and educationally backward. Agriculture is badly affected by poor irrigation facilities. Frequent clashes among communities gave boost to illicit distillation. No major initiatives had taken place in the past, either from the government side or from the social organizations, to improve the lot of the people. So, which new approach will you adapt to bring problems and control? Now, the nature of the case study, it is the situation. And now, situation is demanding that you must come out from a role of an SP as merely law and order to a proactive role as to how you can help in the capacity of a bureaucrat. So, this is a situational case study, and this is the type 5 because you have to give a new approach, and you must also justify the reasons how you are going to do it. So, the case study relates to foundational values of administration, especially the compassion, empathy, etc. Now, ethical issues involved in the case study, whether you think from a narrow sense of the job, or you take a proactive role and look from a broad-minded perspective from the practical situation. So this is the ethical issue you are facing in this case study. Now, what we have to see is a new approach. New approach is important here. So the issue is seen as a law and order so far, but it is not a law and order, it is a socio-economic issue. In such a socio-economic issue, you must have a different perspective to solve the problem. So the solution should be with a new approach. Now what the IPS officer should take the approach? Now there is a limitation for him because he is an IPS officer, he cannot have access towards other aspects of administration. But he can work with other agencies. So he must take a proactive role like this. While dealing with the cases of illicit distillation of the liquor, he can have a human approach and you can see the people's intention behind the action. An ethical action should always be viewed not only from the action, but the intention should also be understood, and the circumstances which prompt them to go for such action is also very important. Now, while dealing with the cases, you must show the humanitarian consideration towards the people. Now, you can also do the second one. You can call the elders of the society and ask them to come for a discussion as to how the region can be developed by not resorting to illicit liquor. Then we can also involve the NGOs of a particular region and you can work out with those people as to how it should be done. The fourth one is you can have a discussion with the district administration, especially the collector and the very important revenue officials, and work with them as to how it should be done. Now, specifically in the areas of agriculture and the economic aspects, how you can take the decision. As far as the agriculture is concerned, you can explore for the dry farming techniques which can be applied in a particular region so that the water less, that means the crops which need less water can be encouraged in that particular region. So indigenous knowledge, that's very important because the people know the indigenous conditions. So the indigenous knowledge for improving crop yield to maintain the food supply in the long run. So how we can encourage the crops which need less water and which can sustain the drought situations. Second is the economic measures. In the economic measures, livelihood development programs such as initiation of financial inclusion drive or formation of self-heal groups to improve their skills. So, in the economic side, whether such skills can be developed, we have to explore. The third is about the industrial sector. Now, more industries are required on the small scale. So, for that, what is important is the vocational education related low-level skills so that they can initiate cottage industries. So, in a small scale, such type of cottage industries can be encouraged. But more importantly, education, that is the key for development. And like in Bihar, where such educational initiatives were taken, such initiatives can be taken in this particular area also. Especially the education for the girls, that will definitely yield very good results. So, apart from being an IPS officer taking care of the law and the order, we can go for the other initiations for the socio-economic development of the region, and this is very important. So, the ethical lesson what we can learn from this case study is go beyond the call of the duty. That is very important for our bureaucrat. Now, let us see the case study number 10. Case study number 10, this talks about a big corporate house is engaged in manufacturing industrial chemicals on a large scale and proposes to set up another unit. Many states rejected such type of proposal. The unit was started 10 years ago and was in the full swing till recently. But the pollution caused by the industrial effluent was affecting the land, water, crops in the area, so causing serious health problems and creating law and order problem, necessitating stern police action. And following the public outcry, the state government ordered the closure of the factory. The closure of the factory resulted in the unemployment of not only those workers who have engaged in the factory, it also very badly affected those industry which depended on the chemicals manufactured by it. So now you are a senior officer interested with the responsibility of handling the issue. Now exactly it's what happened in Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu region for the Starlight factory. So what is the nature of the case study here? This is an opinion based. That means, like a consultant, you have to give a solution to such a problem. This is existing in our country, so it is an opinion based and it can be termed as the type 5 because you are going to get the reasons and you are going to substantiate how to solve the issue. Now, the case study can be written like this. The case study relates to ethical dilemma between development versus environment. So it's a dilemma for the administration because we need development and at the same time we have to take care of the environment. The second aspect of writing this case study is the ethical issues involved in the case study are whether the industries need to be closed down permanently or give importance to environment or to the development. So this is to be decided while writing the case study. While writing this, the third aspect is about how are you going to address the issue. Now this can be addressed like this. The issue involved are employment of number of people and the number of other ancillary units were also dependent on this unit. The other side, there is a lot of pollution and causing hazardous problems to the people. So between these two, no amount of development is enough without consideration for the human beings and the environment. So both are important, but the most important is the environment and the human beings. So this is a very important area and the following can be recommended as or you can take the action like this. First thing is no sanction for the additional plant. So this has come with the additional plant. The second is it is to be studied whether it has violated the National Green Tribunal orders. Because there are many issues already happened, now you have to study whether it has violated the norms of the National Green Tribunal. Then ask the company to come with programs to outreach, the community outreach programs, so that the damage caused to the environment can be minimized. Now, what is the corporate social responsibility? The company has been doing this. And we must also see that the chemicals which are being released from the factory are to be taken care of. And they should not be released into the fields freely and they must be taken and they must be disposed and in a place which is very safe. And the company should also see that gradually some activities which are adversely polluting the area can be shifted to some other area, and a future plan should be in view that slowly and slowly this factory can be shifted to some other place, but immediately closing down the factory will greatly impact on the employment opportunities of the people working in the company and the ancillary units which are existing in and around. So, immediately, abruptly closing the factory without giving notice to the company to rectify its mistakes is not a fair idea. And as a consultant and as a responsible officer, you can recommend in a gradual way, and that will definitely heal ease the issue, and the people may not be replaced immediately, and gradually the company can be shifted, or maybe some precautions can be taken. So, what is the ethical lesson we learned from this case study? The case study, what we've learned is that while granting permission for starting any unit, it's always better to see the environment and the condition of the locality, and the people's development should be given more importance than the economic development. So, this is what we learned from the case study. Come to the 11th case study. 11th case study is very interesting. Is a medical practitioner in the city. He wanted to, he structured a super specialty hospital in the city to cater to the medical needs of all sections. But incidentally, that part of the state had been neglected over the years. The proposed hospital would be a boon for the region. So he is doing a wonderful work for doing this human activity. But in the process, what happened? You are the tax investigating agency that reason, and you inspected the clinic, and you found some major irregularities regarding the tax evasion and irregularities regarding the technical aspects. Now, in this, you are given two choices. What are the two choices given to you? Taking a broader view, ensure substantial tax compliance, and ignore defaults that are merely technical in nature. This one. Number two choice is this. Number two, pursue the matter strictly and proceed in all fronts, whether substantial or merely technical. Like a typical bureaucrat, as the head of the tax agency, which course of action will you opt and why? So this is the case. Two choices are given to you. Can you go for third alternative here? So this is very important. Now, what is the nature of the case study here? The nature of the case study is opinion based. Now, what is your opinion on this thing? You go by this first one, or you go by the second one, or something else. So you are going to give your version here. Okay, in this 11th case study, the nature now is the procedure. Yes, the nature in this case study is the procedure-based case study, and the type is type 3. Is the type 3 case study because two choices are given to you, and you have to go for third alternative. How to write the case study? The case study relates to work culture. So, as a taxman, how are you going to execute your work? You strictly implement the law and order, that means the rules, procedures, and the stipulations, and see that everything is strictly followed? Or are you going to take a view where the tax is concerned, collect the tax, because no compromise as far as the money is concerned in the administration, But as far as the procedures are concerned, you can have a view of understanding the difficulties and making the things easier. So this depends on your attitude as a taxman. So the case study relates to work culture, and the ethical issues involved in the case study are go by the letter of the law or go by the spirit and the practicality of the law. This is an issue you have to decide. So in this case study, you are given two choices. Now go for the pros and cons, the merits and demerits of these two aspects. If you go by the first one, taking a broader view and ensure substantial tax compliance and ignore defaults that are merely technical in nature, the first thing is you are collecting the tax, that's fine, but that's the merit. What is the demerit? You are taking a lenient view, and the people may think that you are not strictly following what is required of the taxman. Leniency should not be taken as that means your consideration should not be taken as a weakness. So that's the harm of the issue, demerit. In the case of this, you are strictly following, so you will get a very good appreciation that you are a strict officer. But in the process, what happens is the goose is going to die. So what's more important is we must, as a taxman, collect the taxes, no compromise. At the same time, we must be consideration as far as the technical aspects are concerned. So the merits and demerits of the first one and second one were discussed. Now, which course do you follow here? You neither go by the first one or by the second one, but you can go for a third alternative, slightly modifying the first one. So here the purpose of the person is to help the region to develop, and especially this the health issue is going to take. So you have to appreciate the person because he is establishing a unit for the society. Now the approach as a taxman, what you can follow is no compromise on tax, so collect all the taxes which are due on this issue. The second is examine the technicalities of the issue. Normally, the technical aspects are not being understood by a doctor. He may not be having a chartered accountant to help him. Even if he has, the provisions of the act may not be properly understood by even the doctor and the consultant. So it's always better you go for advisory visit. Under the tax regime, maybe under VAT or the GST, there is one provision under the act. As soon as you give the license called the registration, then you must take the advisory visit to see whether the procedure is being followed correctly or not. After giving the advice, registration within 60 days, you have to visit the firm or the organization and see that the company has been following correctly the procedures. If not, you have to educate them that what is to be followed as the correct procedure. The technicalities are to be explained. If you find this is very difficult to understand, you can recommend the same to the higher officers so that they can give clarificatory audits so that others also can be benefited out of your understanding of the issue. The third aspect is see that he is not going to record the same, and you can have a second visit to see whether he has been following the procedure what you have educated correctly or not. If not, then we can take some other penal action. But as long as he is not ignorant, we should not penalize him. We must also understand that ease of doing business is the motto of each and every government. In the ease of doing business, the purpose of the government is to make things simple, because people cannot spend much of the time in understanding and in litigations. So the most important aspect is how to uh, how to ease of doing the business, and you must simplify the procedures. Now, what is the ethical lesson we can learn out of this? The ethical lesson out of this case study is goods should not be killed. Always give a second chance to rectify and live with honor. It's very important. So, an administrator should always give a chance to others to rectify themselves and live with honor. We should not be penalized in the first instance itself for the technical reasons. So this is the ethical lesson what we can learn out of the case study. And coming to the last one, case study number 12. This is Edward Snowden. It's a very interesting case study. Snowden, he worked as a computer expert, a former CIA administrator, and this man released confidential government documents to the press about the existence of government surveillance programs. Now, there is now controversy as to whether a government employee can come to the press and release the documents which are confidential, even if he wants to serve a better cause of the public. But here in this case, it is against the Espionage Act of 1971, and it's a leakage of state secrets as an act of treason. So, despite the fact that he broke the law, Snowden argued he had moral obligation to act. So, he gave a justification for his whistleblowing activity by stating that he had a duty to inform the public as to that which is done in their name and that which is done against them. So he has taken a stand that whatever he had done was right, and it is for the sake of protecting the stakeholders. Now the question is, do you agree with Snowden's actions were ethically justified, even if legally prohibited? Why not? Make an argument by weighing the competing values in this case. Now this is very interesting. There is a tussle between the law versus the ethics. Whether a bureaucrat working in an organization can come to the press and expose these things to the public. Now the action of Snowden, whether it is ethical or whether it is legal. It's not legal definitely, it's going against it, but the question is whether it is ethical. Now the question is, ethics should be understood correctly. Apparently, if you can see this action of Snowden, it appears to be ethical because he is helping for the transparency in the administration, and at the same time, the stakeholders, especially the people, their secrets are not being released to other or for some other purpose. So they are now aware of why this surveillance is being taken, whether it is for their benefit or for the against the benefit, so that they can protect their rights. From that point of view, it appears to be ethical. But ethics should be understood in a broader perspective, because ethics can be defined as a well-founded standards of right and wrong. So this right and wrong, good or bad, should be understood very in a broader perspective. In this ethical paper, in question number 6, there is a quotation from Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said, very important item, he said, the true rule in determining to embrace or reject anything is not whether it has any evil in it, but whether it has more evil than good. So whatever the government is doing, whether it's more evil than good, that is very important and very interesting. And he said almost everything, especially of government policy, is an inseparable compound of the two, so that our best judgment of the preponderance between them is continually demanded. Now, here the case is to be understood. It is not only that you do good to the society, but you must also understand the procedure to good to the society is equally important. To write the case study, we can do like this. The case study relates to probity in governance. It's the procedural integrity which anybody has to do, so it comes under the probity in governance. Now, the ethical issues involved in the case study are whether an ex-employee after retirement or after transfer from the post can reveal the confidential information even in the guise of whistleblowing, stating that it is against the people to the press. So, whether the action of Snowden is ethically justified, even if legally prohibited, this is the issue here. So, ethics should be understood in a broad base, as we have discussed. So, the question is the larger interest of the nation. The larger interest of the nation should be kept in mind. So, certain things should be kept secret from the ordinary eye. Here, as per the procedure, the national security is kept out of the act of the whistleblowers also. So he said that he came forward in the form of the whistleblowing, but the provisions, if you can take, the whistleblowing act keeps the national interest aspects, the secrets, out of the purview of the whistleblowers. The second is, it should be reported to the competent authority, not to the press. Nowhere it is given that we can go to the press and give whatever we want to. So, the person who is concerned about the welfare of the people can go in a very systematic way. First, he must approach the competent authority and not the press, because there is a danger of misinterpretation of the information, which is more dangerous to the society, because the people may not understand in proper perspective. So better we must report this matter to the competent authority. So in this case, Snowden definitely violated the very procedure, causing more harm than the good. So if the competent authority has not taken action, then he can go for the pill to the courts. So public interest litigation is another weapon available to him. So he can file a case in the court, and courts are definitely going to look into these matters. If it is really harmful to the interest of the public, definitely courts will take and give judgments against the provisions of particular acts. What it happened in the case of Aadhaar very recently, the Supreme Court has struck down certain provisions and maintained that the sanctity of the Aadhaar. Like that, whatever is harmful to the society will be taken care of by the courts. So, the person, the ex-employee or the person who is transferred from one place to other place can bring this to the notice of the higher-ups or to the competent authority who is designated to take care of such issues, or we can go to the court to take care of these things. But it's not better to come to the public and say, this is what is happening. So this can be rectified. So we must always understand the issue, whether it is ethical to come to the public, though it is beneficial to the public, but we must also see the institution, which is more important. If we must understand that we cannot burn the house for the sake of the rats. That's a very, very important aspect. So this can be rectified. if a mistake is there, that can be rectified, but not burning the house for the sake of the rats. So, the ethical lesson we can learn out of the case study is institutions should not be destroyed. They must be reformed. Sorry, reformation is required by a public servant, but we should not go for the destruction of these things. That will send a bad what the picture, and the society may think that the institutions are incapable of handling certain issues. So this is the way how the 6 case studies are being discussed here. And for studying any case study, it's always better you know the nature of the case study. In the 12th case, we have seen that the nature of the case study is the procedure based. The procedure which Snowden has forgotten, or maybe say he left and he came to direct to the press. So the procedure is the nature is the procedure based. Now we have seen the 6 case studies, and to sum up these things, whenever you take the case study, understand the nature of the case study and the type of the case study. You must also understand the ethical issues involved in the case study, and you must have the rules as to how the case study is to be written, and finally writing the case study. Writing the case study as if it is a beautiful short story, very interesting. At the same time, it should follow the correct methodology, it should follow the legal procedures, it should also follow the ethical aspects. Ultimately, between the law and ethics, definitely ethics prevails over the law, but the law should be amended in such a way that it equates to the ethics. So this is the care a candidate should take care of while writing the case studies, and they should not go against whatever they have written in the previous theoretical aspects. So there should be a correlation between what you have written in the theoretical aspect that should reflect in the case studies also. That's the reason when you write the case study, your stand is very clear, and basing on the stand, you can write the part B, that is part A, that is called the ethics. The theoretical aspects of the ethics, 12, 13 aspects were given in this paper, and 6 are the case studies. So write the case studies first because it's so practical, and after that move on to the part A. This way you can get very good marks in the ethics. Wish you all the best. Thank you for listening to me.